Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into Yankee Doodle, The Hidden Story. Now, we all know this tune, right? It's a majestic march, an absolute staple of American patriotism. But did you know it actually started out as a song sung by British soldiers during the Revolutionary War? They literally used it to mock the ragtag, underfunded American troops. Eventually, the Americans kind of flipped the script and co-opted it, making it their own. But if we really stop and look closely at the complete original lyrics, there is this whole escalating story tucked right inside those upbeat verses. We're going to break down the actual text today and uncover the surprisingly shocking journey of a completely naive narrator who wanders into a world he is entirely unprepared for. Yankee Doodle went to town riding on a pony, stuck a feather in his cap and called it macaroni. We've all heard this famous, upbeat opening line a million times. It's super catchy, it's lighthearted, and it paints a picture of, a pretty goofy character. But what's absolutely fascinating about these specific lyrics is how this incredibly famous chorus completely masks the terrifying story that unfolds right after it. Think of this chorus as a deceptive curtain, totally hiding the grim, gritty realities of the American Revolutionary War that the rest of the song actually describes in vivid detail. But what happened after he went to town? To answer that, we've got to look past the whole feather and macaroni thing. When we dive into the later verses, we start following this very rustic, innocent country boy on a sequential journey deep into a massive military camp. We're going to track his emotional arc verse by verse as he goes from wide-eyed rural awe to outright paralyzing terror. Arriving at the camp, the real story kicks off when our young narrator and his father head down to a military encampment. They go along with a Captain Gooding, which tells us they're stepping right into the beating heart of a Revolutionary War militia gathering. But keep in mind our narrator is just a farm boy. He is stepping into this intense world of coordinated military power, and he is completely, utterly unprepared to process what he's looking at. And there we saw the men and boys as thick as hasty pudding. The very second he arrives, he's totally overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it all. Just look at the language he uses here. To wrap his head around thousands of soldiers gathered together, he reaches for literally the only frame of reference he has. A rustic farm analogy. He says the men are packed together as thick as hasty pudding. It's this brilliantly innocent observation that instantly tells us just how out of place he really is. The shocking excess of the camp. This brilliantly illustrates the massive cultural gap between everyday rural farm life and a fully funded military operation. Our country boy is just utterly shocked by the camp's logistics. He sees 1,000 men present, packed together as thick as hasty pudding, and he is appalled by what he thinks is incredible waste. He talks about food wasted every day like a richest squire. To him, the fact that these guys are eating molasses every single day, that is a mind-boggling luxury a simple farmer could only ever dream of. Interpreting weapons of war. So, as our narrator wanders deeper into the camp, he moves past the food and stumbles right into the actual military equipment. And this is where the lyrics become a genuinely fascinating study in perspective. He's desperately trying to make sense of these terrifying weapons using hilariously naive, everyday observations from his life back on the farm. And there I see a swamping gun large as a log of maple upon a deuce little cart to load for father's cattle. He wanders into an artillery division, but he doesn't call it a cannon. He sees this massive weapon and dubs it a swamping gun. He says it's as big as a maple log, just resting on a tiny deuce little cart that looks like something you'd use to haul his dad's cows. He even mentions that when it fires, it uses a whole horn of powder and makes a sound a nation louder than his father's hunting gun. So we have the literal quote, a log of maple upon a little cart, up against the military reality, a large, incredibly loud military cannon. The crucial takeaway here is how this innocent perspective functions. It takes this terrifying, lethal piece of artillery, a cannon designed to obliterate enemy lines, and shrinks it down into harmless farm equipment. In his brain, it's just a really loud log on a cattle cart. The absolute horror of war is entirely filtered out by his pure lack of understanding. Captain Davis had a gun. He kind of clapped his hand on and stuck a crooked stabbing iron upon the little endo. The crazy misunderstandings just keep coming as he watches the infantry. He sees a guy named Captain Davis kind of clap his hand on his weapon and attach a crooked stabbing iron to the end of it. The narrator is literally watching a soldier prep for brutal close-quarters combat, and he describes it with the casual, innocent curiosity of someone just watching a blacksmith at work. Comparing his rustic description of a crooked stabbing iron to the military reality of a lethal bayonet attached to the end of a rifle is pretty wild. Instead of using standard military terms, his mind registers a deadly bayonet simply as this weird, crooked piece of iron. He doesn't grasp at all that this instrument is designed specifically for taking human life in hand-to-hand combat. To him, it's just another odd little tool these city men brought along. I see a little barrel, too. The heads were made of leather. They knocked on it with little clubs and called the folks together. Even the basic communication tools are a total mystery to this kid. He watches a snare drum being used to rally the troops, but how does he describe it? Merely as a little barrel with leather heads, being tapped with tiny clubs to call the folks together. The strict, disciplined reality of a marching army goes completely over his head. But who was commanding this massive, frightening camp? With all these giant swamping guns, stabbing irons, and little leather barrels calling thousands of guys together, we really have to ask, who is pulling the strings here? Our narrator naturally starts looking for the man in charge of this overwhelming spectacle. Spotting Captain Washington, the whole narrative peaks when the young boy finally lays his eyes on the leadership. He specifically spots the towering historical figure of Captain Washington, yes, George Washington himself, who the narrator mentions is riding a slapping stallion surrounded by gentle folks. He got him on his meeting clothes upon a slapping stallion. He set the world along in rows, in hundreds, and in millions. Notice how he just keeps applying that rural translation to everything. He looks at General Washington decked out in full military regalia and just assumes the man is wearing his Sunday meeting clothes. He watches Washington effortlessly organize this disciplined army and playfully describes it as casually setting the world in perfectly straight rows of hundreds and millions. The country boy's view of meeting clothes and flaming ribbons contrasts sharply with the general's actual stature, a full military dress uniform commanding an awe-inspiring army. The narrator's innocence is on full display here. He admires these fine flaming ribbons in Washington's hat, which were probably military insignias, thinking they look so cool that he wants one for himself. He completely, utterly misses the grave reality. Washington isn't showing off his church clothes. He is preparing these rows of soldiers for the brutal reality of a deadly war. The frightening reality. Okay, this is the sudden dark turn in our explainer. Up until now, the repetitive, bouncy chorus has perfectly matched the kid's whimsical, confused observations. But right here, the song abruptly slams into a brick wall. It hits the grim, terrifying truth of what this camp is actually built for. I see another snarl of men digging graves. They told me so. Torn along so tarn deep, they tended they should hold me. Boom. All of that rustic awe instantly vanishes. Wandering around, the boy stumbles onto a snarl of men doing hard labor. They aren't making hasty pudding. They aren't playing little leather barrels. They are digging graves. And because he is so small and naive when he sees how tarn deep these trenches are, he genuinely, truly believes the soldiers intend to throw him in them. The true reality of a battlefield suddenly and violently breaks through his innocent filter. It scared me so, I hooked it off, nor stopped as I remember, nor turned about till I got home, locked up in mother's chamber. The sheer paralyzing terror of those deep graves sends this poor kid into a total panic. The lyrics tell us it scared him so badly that he hooked it off, which basically means he ran away as fast as humanly possible. He sprints blindly away from the camp, away from the swamping guns, away from the stabbing irons, and absolutely refuses to look back until he is perfectly safe, locked away and hiding in his mother's chamber. If we look at the narrator's emotional arc, we can map exactly how this psychological journey builds. In Hour 1, he goes to the camp with his father and Captain Gooding, full of curious, rural excitement. Hour 2, he's marveling at the massive swamping guns with total comedic misunderstanding. Hour 3 peaks with his admiration for Captain Washington's meeting clothes. But then, Hour 4, he becomes utterly terrified by those deep graves. Finally, Hour 5, he violently crashes into reality, fleeing home and locking himself in his mother's chamber. So, when you hear that famous upbeat chorus today, will you remember the terrified boy running away to hide in his mother's chamber? Ultimately, what this explainer reveals is that right beneath a catchy, seemingly harmless patriotic tune lies a vivid, legitimately terrifying story about a loss of innocence during the Revolutionary War. We blindly sing about the pony and the macaroni, but we entirely forget about the deep graves and the sheer panic. So I'll leave you with this. What else might we be completely missing in the historical songs and stories we just mindlessly repeat every day? Keep asking questions, always look at the source material, and we'll catch you in the next explainer.